My earliest memory really has to do with my grandmother's house in Canton. One of the clearest memories was celebrating the end of the war, so I must have been about 3. We were sitting on the back porch, and there were cars going by and honking, and my grandfather was shooting his shotgun, but there weren't any fox or skunks for him to be shooting at. So there was this whole celebratory thing happening, and that was one of my very first memories of Canton, and that would have been at my grandmother's house. And Aunt Ella, that lived in this particular home, I remember we got in the car and we drove over to Ypsilanti to get into some kind of a parade. So I was very young, and that's a memory of being here in Canton at that time. My father passed away when I was 3, so I spent a great deal of time with my grandparents. I spent a lot of time there because my mother was working and I was with my grandparents. So many of my memories are on the farm. My grandfather would say, I'm going to put 40 acres in of corn on the land, and then they would switch to soybeans. So I remember discussion about crops and where they were going to be in those days. Farming was a big part of the rhythm of life, where the tractor's running. So everything sort of revolved around weather and crops and the health of the cows and all of that type of farming economy. The early memories of farm chores are feeding the chickens. And I loved the chickens. You could feed them, and they had eggs, and so that was the first farm chores. And that was like a rite of passage. You were so excited that you could participate. My grandparents' farm was really a farm designed to provide some income, but mostly food for the family. So I had about 6 pigs and maybe 50 chickens. It was exciting to be a part of the rhythm of the family life, which revolved around farming. I can remember helping my grandmother in her garden, planting the tomatoes. Staying on that theme, my grandfather had really bad arthritis and couldn't drive the tractor. My older brother Gordon was in the Navy, so he was away. Bruce was at the University of Michigan, so he was in May. It was finals and things were going on. And plowing needed to get done because my grandfather had someone coming in to help and plant. So I got 3 days off school to plow. So I was really excited about that. So it was a different look at work and how you were initiated to being able to be a part of contributing. I lived on Joy Road from the time I was born. My 2 brothers had been born in the house on Canton Center Road. So I lived on Joy Road from the time I was born until I graduated from high school. Growing up in Canton in this area, it was really safe. I could walk from my grandparents' house, which would be probably a quarter of a mile down the road. My grandmother would send me up here with, if she'd made chicken and dumplings, well, then she'd send me up with a package of food for Aunt Ella. She lived on her own, and no one thought about walking anywhere. As a matter of fact, Joanne and I, one time, we were in 4th grade and decided we'd walk home from school, and Smith School was in Plymouth. And walking was just something you did, and you weren't afraid. You might encounter someone you know, and they'd wave, and away you went. So that was something that was really easy about living here in this era and that time. My grandmother was born in Canton. She was a Smye, So my grandfather was the Travis. That's where the Travis connection comes in. And her brother fought in the Spanish-American War. So the Smythes and the Harmons were in the Canton area. The Travises showed up on the scene later. They had moved here 1890 or so, set up business, and then moved into Canton, and saw this as a good farming opportunity. And so that's where they purchased the house from the Bartletts. Even though there was Canton, our identity was Plymouth. My grandparents' address was 6515 Canton Center Road, Plymouth, Michigan. It wasn't Canton until later on, I think, in the 80s. Yeah. But the identity was Plymouth. The only time Canton was referred to as a place when people we were on Canton Center Road, would talk about going to Canton and Ford Road down to Hoff's. I'm going down to Canton Corners. So I would hear them say, and Julian's grocery store was on that Canton corner. So that was the only reference to a place in Canton at the time. And to see Canton today, it's like, wow, so different. Early on, 4-H was a big part of the growing up when I was a kid. Wanted to be in 4-H. I was also in Girl Scouts. They sort of went hand in hand. And so all the farm things, the gardening, being in Girl Scouts, it was kind of a natural that I liked to be out in the woods and gathering all sorts of things, moss, and making terrariums and all sorts of things. My first 4-H livestock project was chickens, and so that was exciting. Then I had a pig, Henry, and everybody got mad. I said, named him Henry. Well, my grandfather was Henry Travis, and I said, well, he's Henry the Second, you know. So we had the pig, and then later on, I had a Jersey Belle cow. Uncle Perry encouraged me to get a cow and have that in at his place and raise that for 4-H. So 4-H was a lot of our activities, not only domestic, we also did the knitting, the sewing, and every year there was the fair in Belleville, was the Wayne County 4-H fair. So that was a big part of our activities. Not much after school activity. I did have a neighbor that had a television, and we watched Howdy Doody, I think, once in a while. I think the first is the people. You often think, gee, I would like to talk to Uncle Perry, or wouldn't it be nice if I could just see Aunt Ella or talk to them? So you miss the people, and I think that's the biggest. I miss the cornfields. This used to be the sweet corn capital of Michigan, and now we don't have the cornfields. I miss the good gardens that everybody seemed to have here. It was just, the food was so good. The tomatoes were so sweet and good, and we had apple trees. I miss that we just can't walk out the door and pick apples and go get sweet corn and have tomatoes and say, yeah, that would be what I miss the most. The 4-H fair was a big one. That was the big event of the summer. And I don't know how special an event, but it was an event. Over on Warren Road and Sheldon, there was a farm, one of the neighbors, Backus's, they had a big dairy farm. And one summer, was a bad storm and lightning hit the barn and it burned. They had just put in new hay, and they say that when the lightning hit, Mr. Backus said that the cows fell down on their knees because they were in their stanchions. They were just brought in for milking. And he knew that something bad had happened. So he let all the cows out, and they got out, and the barn almost exploded with the burning because the heat and the lightning. And so a special event was when the barn got rebuilt. And there was a huge barn dance. It was a big event. All the neighbors, and I remember the 4-H group, and they had a square dance caller. And I must have been about fourth grade when that happened. Maybe, yeah, around fourth, fifth grade. And then, of course, 25 years later, the barn is taken down, not by a fire, but by a subdivision. So not being able to see those landmarks when I drive by one of my classmates' home, it's nice to know that it's there and it's still around. My early memories, had to have been very small, was coming to this big white house up the road, and my grandmother would often bring something to Aunt Ella if she'd had a spell, whatever that might have been, not feeling well. Or I remember coming here, Aunt Ella would take care of me. I would stay here, and she would keep me busy either making pies, or sometimes up in the quilting room, I'd go underneath the quilt and push the needle up for her when she was hand quilting something. I felt at ease here, but at awe. The particular room that we're in right now was closed off. Most of the time, it was where they had funerals or dignitaries, and I don't know who they would have been, but I just remember Mr. Ford. The Fords did come and visit here, and also down at the Jersey Belle Dairy because of the manufacturing bottling process that they were interested in. And then, of course, my Aunt Ella's grandson, John, who was out here more often than I was, but he used to tell me, he said, there are dead people in there. And I was like, I don't want to go in there, It was like, he had fun teasing me and scaring me. Women would come and quilt, and that's when this stairway was used. But most of the time, to get upstairs, we used the stairway from the kitchen. It was interesting. The stairway was referred to as the hired hands. There was never a hired hand that I knew of. I wasn't a hired hand, and I don't know who was the hired hand, but that's how they referred to it. The dining room was, when I was a child, was not used as the dining room. Aunt Ella was pretty much had confined her life and keeping it warm to using the kitchen and the dining room. She had a big farm table in the kitchen. So when we came to eat, my brothers and I, and maybe my mom, we would eat in the kitchen area. And she had a chaise lounge, sort of a day bed in the what's set up as the dining room and would really be the dining room. So I never knew it as a dining room. The porch was here, and that's an area I loved to play in as a kid. Oh, that was the favorite. I could bring my dolls and play with my dolls here, and that was the porch was lovely. I can remember being on the porch when I would be sent to stay with Aunt Ella for the afternoon, and I have in my memory book a picture of my mother sitting on the porch, but the porch was white. The whole house was white, with so that to see it a different color is. I don't know why it was painted that color, unless that's what it was when the Bartletts owned it. I don't know. Aunt Ella sold the house. Her grandson, John, my cousin, we were buddies. We'd play together in the summer, had gotten married, and she sold the house, and I believe it became an antique store. I was in there in it once, and I was so saddened to see it turn into something that I had remembered as a child as a home where someone lived and family activities had taken place here. So that was, I only stopped in it that once. But my mom became really very involved with the Canton Historical Society, and she was here the day they moved it. She called me and said, they're moving great grandpa's house, and I said, you're kidding. And it was quite the operation to get it moved from there to here, and even to have the vision to do that. I just am very grateful that this house didn't get bulldozed like so many of them have. And when they opened it as a historical, the first time, my daughter and my two grandsons came with me for that afternoon. That was really special. I'm just grateful that someone had the vision to save a little bit of history. A lot of good memories here with family and with friends, and my cousin teasing me.